So it is Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day to you. This is I got my red on today, as you can see. I'm so it doesn't take much for me to get excited and happy and all that good stuff. Um, I will say that it's weird. I do mute my phone at night. It goes on automatic mute. And I guess there were people trying to wish me happy Valentine's Day at 3 a.m., maybe to be the first to get it in. I'm not sure. But whatever the case may be, happy Valentine's Day to you. And I hope you had an amazing and fabulous weekend. I will tell you that most of the weekend I was sitting right here. I had a class that I attended, which is through NAMI of Geauga County, that was based on NAMI services. It's called Family to Family. And so I did both a 9 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday right here. And so it is just like this morning when I was like, it's time for me to sit back in that seat again. And whatever the case may be. Hey, Erica, good morning. Is that red I see on your head? Bless you, dear heart. Yeah, so I am right back here. Happy Valentine's Day to you. Thank you. That is so sweet. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so I'm right back here. And as you know, Stephanie is not with me this week. And so she is starting a week-long vacation. She will be back on the 21st. And on the 21st, we will again have our, powwow with everybody in the room. And so, to see what unfolds on this given week is, to me, exciting stuff, just because I get to kind of journey through this book. And not saying I love doing this with Stephanie, right? I really do. And so I'm going to kind of tarry on, though, because a week is a week with, in the course of doing this. Now, I will say to you that I'm excited too, because Lent is coming up. And originally when we started doing this right here, it was because I wanted to do a Lent excursion, a deep dive, and invited I think I invited I don't know if I had already started when Stephanie called me and then invited her, or if I invited her and we did Lent together. I don't know, but I know that I had already started. That's what it was. I had already started sending it out over another network. I was trying to do it on another venue. And you guys know it is really hard to get something started like this, like say, for instance, just putting a live up on YouTube. It's much harder than doing it right here on Facebook, where people who might drift in and see you or whatever it is. But I think I was trying to do it on another in another space, and so that wasn't necessarily working out. So then we came here and on Zoom and did this together, and it has worked out. So can you believe that it is coming around Lent again, which means that it is like a 1-year anniversary for starting all of this. And even though my days may not say that, may not reflect that, I don't know when we started counting, but that's how it all got started. So now I get to do this again, and as we journey through this piece of it, yay, I'm excited. So anyway, this weekend I learned, everybody has their drama. Everybody. And it's as if, the Course in Miracles says that, it says this is a Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. And so I used to think to myself, like, do we really have courses that we are living through? Like life lessons that grow us and grow us up. And then when you really start to do a real look at not just your own life but other people's lives, what you see is that we've all got something. It's like we've got a specially um orchestrated like lesson for our lives. So yours may be one thing. So mine's may be to find whatever. I could be finding my voice or finding my power or whatever it is. But for each of us, we've got a highly individualized curriculum. So if mine's is around what is pushing me, the desire that I have, that the thing that's pulling me. So whether it's the writing the book piece, or whether it is this speaking, or whatever it is that is pulling me in a particular direction, you also have something that's pulling you. Now, I have been through over the hills and through the woods, so to speak, because I struggled around money, I've struggled around relationships, I've struggled around my own identity, I've struggled around sexuality. I mean, I have had my fair share of struggles. And then when you encounter other people, what you realize is they also have their fair share of struggles that are meant just for them. And this idea that somehow we've got this hierarchy, like, oh, everybody wants to one up, right? Everybody wants to say, oh, my stuff is your stuff. You thought your stuff was hard. Well, look, and we start enumerating our stuff like, oh, I got it worse. And so there's this tendency to kind of one up people when it comes down to struggles, or else we want to dismiss people as if, oh, you done had it so easy. You don't know. Nobody knows. You know that song, Nobody Knows the Troubles I've Seen. We've got that kind of thing, that kind of energy or vibration that goes on. Nobody knows the troubles I've seen. And so when we sit in that, it's as if we don't trust the universe to give us all exactly what we need to grow through the stuff that is going on in our life, through the dramas that are in my life. But what we find is that our curriculums, the things that we come in this life to work through, are just for us. And it's not about comparing it to this person or that person or saying anything about what somebody else has been through. But it's really about mastery of our own individual stuff. Now, I will say, I would love to be able to come up and say to everybody, whoever it is, oh, I know what your stuff is, and then articulate your stuff and then tell you, like, give you a roadmap on how to do it. I don't know that I would love to, but it just seems like it would be so much easier to say, okay, this is the goal. This is the end goal of where you're trying to get to. It seems like if we had that kind of a reassurance that that this is the particular place that you're supposed to be going. So some people will equate that to they'll set a goal and they'll think that it's a financial goal, or they'll set a goal and think that it is a goal that has to do with education or relationships or happiness or a body weight or a self-image, or I mean any number of things. It could just be peace in your house. That could be a goal. Whatever it is how do we get there? How do we get there from where we are? And so sometimes the route is circuitous and we don't know. exactly what we're supposed to be doing, or we don't know exactly how to get there, and still keep all the pieces that are, there is this funny thing that one of the things we try to do is if you got a puzzle, say for instance, if you got a 500 piece puzzle and you throw it all out on the table, you know that all of the pieces that are supposed to go into the puzzle are there on the table, right? You get that they're right there. And so when you see that they're right there on the table, it's not that you can take and throw away some of them and think that you're going to have a whole puzzle when you get to the end. You got to see where all of the pieces fit and how they fit together. And so normally what we do is we take the straight edges and we know that that's going to be a part of the outside. And then we try to put the colors together and know that they're going to go, hopefully we'll know, according to maybe the picture that we see, we'll know how those things go together. But the goal is to really bring the puzzle together and leave all the pieces on the table. Instead, what we have learned is a lot of times what we see is that we try to get rid of pieces, right? Get rid of people, get rid of stuff, and make peace happen in our lives by getting rid of things. And that's not necessarily the way that it goes, right? It's not necessarily the way that it goes. And so how do we get peace? How do we make things work? How do we do what it is that we need to do with all the things that we have in play? How do we get to where it is that we desire to go? And so that's part of the challenge. It's part of what has to happen for all of us. I don't know if that made any sense, but it was what came up. And so what comes up comes out, and then we move through that, right? So I'm glad that that we all know that we each have something to do, a part to play, a role to work through in our lives. I'm sure you see, I can't stand dirty glasses. Because it's almost like I can see the spots in front of my eyes when my glasses are dirty. And because I'll tell y'all this too. And part of the reason why my glasses get dirty, part of the reason is because I handle them. I handle them, which means that, yeah, they get dirty. And why are my hands dirty? That's what you're going to ask next. Well, because part of my morning routine is baby oil. And so I'm always like, I'm slick. So anyway, so I'm excited about this portion. We've spent a lot of time talking about, I'm saying we, because Stephanie is not here, so of course you don't see her. If this is your first time seeing me or seeing this, we are meandering our way through a book called It Doesn't Start With You by Mark Wolin, and it's talking about inherited family trauma and inherited family drama. And I know that most people associate me with doing things that are spiritual in nature, but the more I've learned and the more that I find out, I learned that everything is spiritual in nature. It's all the lens that through which we see it. Everything. I don't know very much that is not spiritual in nature. So even if we talk about whatever it is that we talk about, we can bring the spiritual component into it. And so whether we're talking about our relationships, or we're talking about sex, or we're talking about work, if we're talking about money, if we're talking about anything we talk about, it is spiritual in nature. So this idea of inherited family trauma, on Friday, we talked about in Numbers, in the Bible, Old Testament Numbers, one of the things that it says is that the sins of the father shall be visited upon the child up to 3 to 4 generations, right? And so when I started looking at this idea of health in the Black community, I started with this thing because I learned about epigenetics a few years back. And I had been talking about it, saying that it changed your DNA. Well, when I really started diving down on the topic, really trying to look at the topic, I wanted to understand it from a deeper perspective. And so I came across several books. I'm going to try to slow down. I came across several books that spoke to this idea of how exactly the DNA is changed, or if it was changed. And in fact, what I found out is that it is not the DNA that is changed, but rather the genomes, or it's our genomes that are changed. So even though we have a DNA strand that gives a lot of information to us as to who we are or who we become, it's the genomes. Good morning, Ruth. It's those genomes that are impressed upon. There is like trauma and environment that impresses or makes impressions upon the genomes that then change up the various DNA, or it rides on top of the various DNA, informing our cells and informing our lives and this stuff that we go through. So if it says the sins, if it says that the sins of the father are visited upon the child 3 to 4 generations, it could also be saying that the blessings are visited upon the child up to 3 or 4 generations. But what we know is what we notice is the things that are out of whack. And so I think that that's why it says that the sins are visited, because when we assume blessings, right? The fact that we are here, we are under the assumption blessing. I am blessed. And so when we talk about this idea of the sins or the traumas that are visited upon the child, the traumas become something different. The traumas are noticeable. The traumas are, we could pinpoint, we can put a finger on there. So as we move into this idea of the family mind in this book, which is chapter 3, can you believe I'm up to chapter 3? Yeah. We only been working on this since January 1st, right? Right. Anyway, whatever. But when we start to talk about this and this idea of the family mind, we shift a little bit, because here he talks about this stuff. So we went through this idea of what happens in the embryonic stage while a woman is pregnant, and how those traumas basically impact the child. But here we are moving from that into this, and the Bible scripture that he uses in the beginning of this, and I don't know. I don't know Mark Willen's status here, but the Bible scripture is Ezekiel 18:2. And he uses the New International Version. And he says, the parent eats sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. The parent eats sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. It's interesting. I used to always use this little quip when people used to try to tie destinies together. And I would say to folks, that when you eat, my stomach don't get full, right? And so I'm not sitting up just kind of worried about you and what you do. I need to actually put food in my own mouth and eat, right? And a lot of times that's how we manage stuff. We act like our destinies are so intricately tied together that we are, we're busy doing for others and forget to do for self. And so that was always one of my reminders. But this is that the parents eat sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. And so it's really an interesting concept when you think about it. So he goes here to say that, I was talking before about how a woman is born with all of her eggs, right? And so that means that if I have all these eggs in me, then the child that I am going to have already exists within me. I mean, in an egg form, in that original cellular form. What it takes is it takes the sperm of somebody else coming and fertilizing that egg in order for life to begin. It's kind of like any other egg, right? When you think about a chicken laying an egg, a chicken laying its egg is not the total process. If you're trying to get a chick, there takes some fertilization. And so the sperm also is coated with information. And that coding, and that's one of the things that I think we need to really be conscious of. It's not just the woman. There is also information coded on sperm that has a direct impact, especially upon women. And so when you think about it from that standpoint of view, is the father doing stuff that is not necessarily good? And y'all, this is not just like the moment that you ejaculate that we have to worry about, but that all of the stuff that you are doing is informing your cells, your cellular tissue, and that is what is communicated. So when you think about it, if you're sitting up smoking weed all day, or if you're sitting up like not even so y'all, I'm reading a new book. I want to tell you what the book is. I want to tell you what the book is because this informs sometimes what I'm doing. I was started reading a new book, and part of what the new book said is this one is called "Change Your Brain, Change Your Body." Now, this guy, he's a medical doctor, and he's talking about how our brains inform our bodies, and if we are not taking care of our brain just like we do the rest of our body. We exercise our body, we feed our bodies, but most people don't think that there is a thing called brain health. And so he talks about the things that feed our brain and the things that causes our brain to, if we were treating it like a muscle and exercising it, the things that cause it to go to sleep or go dormant or to shrink. If you think about all of those ways. And so when he's talking about taking care of the brain, one of the things that he says is that when we don't use our brain, when we don't use our mind, when we don't have synaptic nerves sparking off, when we don't have new stuff coming in, it's as if our brain goes dormant. It's as if it shrinks a little bit, or it goes to sleep. The prefrontal cortex is not firing, or we don't have that the nerve endings doing what it's like it goes to sleep. And so he says that when we play video games, or he talks about what happens when we smoke marijuana, or when we drink too much, or all of these things. And he says, and the conditions of our brain impacts how our brains will function. And so he talks about the things that we need to do to stimulate our own mind. And so in reading that, as I'm reading this, it's like, okay, how is it that we make sure that we have healthy children, right? I'm past childbearing age. I'm gonna say that, right? Whoo, I went through enough of that doggone menstrual cycle to last me a lifetime. So I ain't sitting up tripping on it. So, but I will say that I'm past that stage. However, this stuff is fascinating to know. And I will tell you, I would not have, if I was still childbearing age, I'm not going to sit up there and squeeze one out just so I could prove whatever this person is saying is right or wrong. I recognize that that's not my responsibility. But what it is, though, my responsibility is that once I get this information, to be able to pass on this information. And so I'm not trying to shove it down anybody's throat, but if that is part of bringing all of these things together for the good of my community, then let me bring all of this stuff together so that I can represent it in a way that might make sense. So when we look at our community, when we complain about the things that are going on and what we see around us, we can understand it from a different level, that it didn't start right here. We could talk about it in 2021, talk about, oh, this person, we got so much strife, we got so much this, we got so much that, people are walking around like the Walking Dead or zombies. We can talk about and complain about all of this stuff, but what helps is to have an understanding, like to get up under it and see how the things that has happened has gotten us to the point where we are today, and at some point to help change the trajectory. So hopefully it's what, when we know better, we do better. And if there's something on our part that we can do to undergird this information, then let's be about the business of doing that. So when he says that the what happened to my grandmother has a direct impact on me, I recognize that my grandmother didn't talk a lot about her life. I can remember her talking about her siblings, her brother and sister, and how her brother used to stutter, had a mew. She would tell little jokes about, different things in her family, but we didn't really hear about the family life. On the other hand, I did hear about some of my mother's stuff. What I do know is that my grandmother didn't talk a lot about her childhood. But my mother said that when my grandmother had her, she was not married to the man that she had a child by. My grandmother went to the city to work so that she could send money home so that it would take care of her mother, right? So, which means that now you have an abandoned child, or a child who feels as if they are abandoned because she was left with abusive grandparents, right? So my mother was raised by her grandparents in her early years, something that she always resented, that her mother was not there. And so my grandmother went someplace else. Now, I do not know about, so I can't speak to what my grandmother's childhood was like, but there is probably, more than likely, some disconnection between her and her mother, which could have been because my grandmother's mother was born into slavery, which means that she would not have had the care over her child, and then therefore didn't give care over her own child. And then my mother was like, okay, I'm gonna stop that mess. I ain't gonna never be separate from my children. Now, even though my mother was never separate from us, it doesn't always mean that she was emotionally available to us, right? And so there's a difference between you showing up in a space and you inhabiting the space, if you understand what I'm saying. You can show up in a space, but just because you're present in body doesn't mean that all of you is present. And so when we talk about this sense, is like, is it a sense of like I'm doing the stuff that I believe I'm supposed to do, but where is that, am I being nurtured? Is this nurturing fully possible? How do I show up? How do I engage? How do I love? What is it that is, in part, what am I supposed to do? My grandmother used to talk about, especially when we were little, every baby that she ever held, she used to talk about, you're supposed to rub their head so you can shape their head. You want them to have a nice round head. You don't want the baby to have no long head. Now, I don't know if this made a difference or not, but it was what my grandmother always did, was that she felt like she was shaping somebody's head by rubbing their head. And it kind of impacted everybody about this idea of head rubbing. Now, is the head rubbing the same as connecting? What we notice about animals I don't know, but what we notice about animals is that there is this connection that comes from animals within the eye thing. They will stare at you. Little kids will stare at you. They are looking at every single muscle in your face. That is why this whole thing of wearing masks is so disconcerting to people, because all of the social cues that are normally there when people can see your face is no longer there. They no longer see your smile. They no longer, even when you think that you're smiling with your eyes, they are not quite sure. And so there is all of these cues that we give off with the muscles in our face that are no longer there. Neither here nor there, but rather we look at how this is transferred from generation to generation to generation to generation. We learn parenting from our parents. And so when you think about what it is that he is saying here, and even when we say, I will never do that, what is it that Stephanie just said the other day? She was like, what you judge, oh gosh, how did she say it? She said it something like that. Let me see if I wrote it down. Because I have been on it. I write down and make notes on on all of this stuff all the time. And I have been making notes, and I don't think I wrote that down. But anyway, she says that what you judge, you become, or something like that. It's I forget how she said it, but neither here nor there. But that is, it becomes something in you when you are judging it. So he says in this book, he says, we receive aspects of our grandmother's mothering through our own mothers, because this thing is passed down from generation to generation. So a lot of times, if we want to look at the predicament that we are in, we have to trace it back. And in tracing it back, we see that all of ours, for the most part, since we are direct descendants of slavery, we trace ours back to what happened in that particular setting. And the only way to offset that or to augment that is to then, over time, begin to do something different. Now, if we keep taking that to the nth degree, if we keep taking that where we keep re-traumatizing our children, we never get to the place where we're free and clear unless we interrupt that system, which means that interrupting that system means that we now need to talk about how to interrupt that system, how to stop causing trauma in utero or in those formative years, how to set something different in motion. And it's really, really hard when the environment that you are in is not conducive to that interruption. When the environment that we introduce our children in is stressed, is drama filled, is you got gunshots and firecrackers going off, you got interruptions in care. If you've got that stuff still going on, it's hard to interrupt that without trying to figure out, how do I now stabilize this, right? So he says that traumas in your grandmother endured, whether it's her pain or sorrows, whether it's her depression, whether it's her longing, all of these things are communicated directly to your mother, which will be communicated to you. And these events shape who it is that you are to become. The impact of the particulars can be deeply felt. And so, like when I was saying that my grandmother was not raised, I don't know about my grandmother's life, but I know about my mother's life. My mother was not raised by her grandmother. And so then that trickles down into next generations and next generations. How does that work, right? And then what does that mean? What does that say about our level of engagement and all those other things, right? And so if we look at that, we can see it played out in different arenas in our lives. I have seen, and I'm sure that you do too, if you look at patterns of people, especially if you know the child, and then you know the parents, and if possibly grandparents, you can sort of see the trajectories and the subtle ways in which these types of things manifest themselves. And so if we inherited all of this stuff, all of the parenting patterns, then we can understand a little bit more. Parents tend to pass on their parenting that they themselves receive, because what they do becomes hardwired in our brain, and then we tend to repeat it in spite of the desires that we may have, unless of course we arrest that. My mother's, one of my mother's favorite things, one of my favorite things was to ask why, right? And my mother was to say, because I said so. and it wasn't even as if, it was like, she ain't running no democracy here. As a matter of fact, that's what I heard a friend of mine say. Justice was the other day, he was talking about how he ran his classrooms, and he was like, he said, this is a dictatorship, which is a lot of times what you felt like with your parents. I don't know if you felt that way with your parents, but I certainly did with mine. And when we hear people talk about their own particular parenting skills, it's really interesting what it is that we perceive to be right that may act to the detriment of our own children, right? So this idea that children are to be seen and not heard, or that you are not running a democracy, may be something that stamps out a person's creativity or their true self. I mean, it's really interesting to see nowadays, as people are raising children, they have a value in letting a child, their natural personality express itself. So if you see little girls walking around in tutus or wearing costumes wherever they go, or you see little boys that are starting to express their style, their own individual personal styles later, early on in life, letting that come out as opposed to impressing upon them the need to be as we want them. My dad, I would say this to y'all too, my dad used to try to do that to me. My father was one of those people, and bless his heart, because he was a present father, right? There was no like absence in him unless he was going to work. So when I tell you that my dad would pull our pants up like Steve Urkel's pants and want to put, instead of recognizing that we had a waist where the belt was supposed to go, he would pull our pants up until it was at our rib cage, and then want to tighten our belt right there. Like, and you gotta walk like that until you get past his vision, and then you pull your pants down to where they're supposed to go around your waist. It is so interesting, because when you think about it, this idea of having personal style is something that you only had once you got old enough, for some of us, right? Once you got old enough to start buying your own clothes, then you could have a thing called personal style. But otherwise, it was like something that people imposed on you. So now when you see new parenting styles, you see people who are allowing their children to be a lot more expressive at earlier ages, and to not traumatize them by saying, no, you're going to do it my way or the highway, right? What do you do at that point? And so all of this stuff is about trying to understand that this stuff is not stuff that just comes out of nowhere, but is something that that kind of is a continuation on. He goes in here and he talks about this guy, Thomas Birney. He says that the moment of conception, the experience in the womb shapes the brain and lays the groundwork for personality, emotional temperament, and the power of higher thought. Right? It lays the groundwork for emotional temperament, personality, and the power of higher thought. Like a blueprint, these patterns are transmitted more than learned. Now, the power for higher thought. Now, this is really interesting too to me, to just even sit in that, right? Whether your child would turn out to be an intellectual or an automaton is what happens, not just, not just in when they are like a little kid, we start playing Mozart and stuff to them, but it takes place in the womb. And even before that, what are you doing for yourself? So these patterns are like blueprints. They are put in there, established prior to. And so whether we can manage our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, all of that stuff comes out of that in vitro thing and those formative years. It says when a mother carries inherited trauma or has experienced a break in the bond with her mother, it can affect the bond that a person has with their children, right? And so the impact of an early break in a mother-child bond, like an extended, and we talked about this before, right? Like an extended hospital stay, a vacation that doesn't include that child, long-term separations can be devastating. As a matter of fact, it says in here that the research has been done, and I'm trying to find out who says it. Dr. Raylene Phillips, a neonatologist at Loma Linda University Children's Hospital, they said that a child has a connection to its mother, almost the equivalent of a drug addict and a drug. And so when you take a child from his mother or separate them from what they have known for 9 months, that means the sounds, the smells, the feel, all of that stuff. When you disconnect a child from its mother, it's like taking a person off heroin cold turkey. It goes through the same kind of withdrawal as if you have now released it from a particular drug, which can be, when you talk about trauma, the idea of that ripping apart is devastating. And so, so whether it's the smell, the feel, the touch, in here, it tells the story about this woman who used to, because of her grandmother's mother died of pneumonia when she was a baby. So she wasn't raised by her grandmother. As a matter of fact, her father was not present either, because the family blamed the father for this woman dying, saying that if you had been home or if you had been doing what you were supposed to be doing, this wouldn't have happened to our daughter. Therefore, they took custody of the child and raised the child, but she was always traumatized. And so then her child used to go berserk whenever her mother left the house. And then the grandchild of this, down that lineage used to be traumatized about her mother leaving. More so to the point where they each talked about how they would go and they would bury their face in their mother's clothes just to get the scent of her, thinking that she would never come back. It was always this type of thing in that family lineage because of the trauma that was experienced there early on. And so all of these things, when you think about it, and I don't know if we really sit in that, right? I know that, say for instance, I have, hey, good morning, Greg. I have a neighbor who I can remember when his children were born. Not only did they have to stay in the hospital disconnected from their parents for a while, once they came home, it wasn't that long afterwards that their mother ended up dying. And I don't even know if they were home from the hospital once the mother ended up dying. But all of those types of trauma impacts the child and their ability to connect with others. And so as we see this played out generation after generation, we sit back and we wonder why it is that we have the type of things that we do in our own community. Not only do mothers matter, the father also matters. And so when we talk about how all of this keeps on getting passed down from generation to generation, we'll understand the bonding or lack thereof. You guys, we have to be about the business of figuring out how we can interrupt this. And so it means that if you've got somebody in your life that is childbearing, if you've got somebody in your life that has small children, we have got to be about the business of then speaking to that and then trying to figure out how we could be a support in this. So whether or not, and sometimes we think that it is just about finding something else. One of the stories that he goes into here is a story about another mother who had died, and the father immediately went out, found another woman and married her. Well, this woman had children besides his child, and this child felt like it was treated like the stepchild, almost starving to death a few times because, you know, this stepmother that was brought in is like the Cinderella story, really abusive and really nasty towards this child. And so then what then happens to the child as he ages? All of this stuff is impactful. So when we're talking about up out of enslavement and slavery, y'all, this is some traumatic stuff. And so unless and until we start to really look at our parenting and what it is that we're doing, we will continue to exist in the spiral. We need to heal our relationships, not just with ourselves, but also with our parents and our grandparents if possible. And even if we are not able to do that in person, we're able to do it in heart and mind so that we can break the cycle of what has happened. You guys, when you meet somebody, when you are starting to date or whatever, just kind of getting a glimpse of what family life was like is an important, like, little nugget of information, so that you can see what it is, the trauma that they are bringing into the relationship and what they may continue to inform their children, your grandchildren, whoever, what it is that that person will continue to experience. There is no guarantees. A lot of times, I am amazed at people who develop some kind of mental illness too, right? And was that present in the first place, or is it something that came later? One of the things that we know that research has said is that sometimes mental illness comes as a result of DNA being too closely aligned together. So so in books there is information that says that a person out of the same family lineage is often more apt to produce children who have some type of birth defect, deformity, mental incapacity, or something, because the DNA is too closely aligned together. So that means that while it may be okay if you are like third cousins or second cousins for people to intermarry or to intermingle, when your DNA is close, like first cousins, uncles and aunts and all of that stuff, that can wreak havoc in the brain matter and in the DNA patterns of other people. So I don't know who that is for, but I just figured I would put that out there too, that sometimes the things that show up in our families are because we have not gotten far enough out of that gene pool to really like form the matches that are important or necessary. Like everything doesn't fire together correctly when that gene pool is too small. So keeping that in mind is part of the ways in which we heal relationships. Y'all, you know what? I don't even, this stuff about family stuff is deep, and it is interesting, and it is, I don't know, it just is crazy interesting to me. I don't even know if, because I get off on this tangent. This is like, it's like so fertile for me. And not just looking at my own stuff, but starting to understand it from a different perspective. Like, yeah, let's look deeper. Let's pull back the covers and see what else has been going on there. Anyway, it's Valentine's Day. Yay! So I'm hoping and trusting that all the love that I'm sending towards you, that you are receiving, and that you get to go out and spread the love and the joy today to whoever it is you encounter. Actually, we should do that every single day, right? To be about the business of love and loving and figuring out how that works. Sometimes people think that they are giving up a part of themselves by loving and embracing another, complimenting somebody, or seeing the best in others. People act as if they've given away something, but you can never give away. You are only ever giving to yourself as you give. And that's the beautiful thing. Once we recognize and learn that you are only ever giving to yourself, then why not? Why not see everybody as beautiful? Why not bless everybody you see? Why not? Why not stay in that energy, right? It is a beautiful thing. So having said that, I am going to let you go, sending you love on this Valentine's Day, loving you, adoring you, and knowing that, you know what, we all have the power to do this. You are the difference maker right here. And so as you continue to walk this walk, I know it is all coming together. It's coming together for you and for everybody you touch and encounter. So I love you, I adore you, and I will see you. I'll be here tomorrow. Blessings to you. Have an amazing day. Happy Valentine's Day.